day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Now, as we continue to cover this conflict and as we continue to observe the coverage by others of this conflict, I would say the ongoing coverage, the vast majority of the coverage is on the ground forces of both sides. We hear a lot about the Ukrainian military. We hear a lot about the Ukrainian ground forces. We hear a lot about the Russian ground forces. And we continue to hear about this stalemate along the line of contact, along the front lines. Now, we are not seeing that stalemate continue in Avdiivka. We are observing daily the Russians continuing to gain territory. On this map, the yellow area is area in which the Russians have recently taken. And obviously the Russians are attempting to encircle Avdiivka and then eventually destroy Ukrainian forces within this cauldron, within this Ukrainian salient. Now, what we don't hear a lot about is air capabilities. Obviously, the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian Air Force, is much smaller than the Russian Air Force, especially in terms if you compare and contrast the Russian ground forces versus the Ukrainian ground forces. The Ukrainian ground forces are probably much closer to the Russian size and scope of its ground forces in its deployment in the ongoing conflict. But where the Russians have the upper hand is in its Air Force. The Russian Air Force is the third largest Air Force in the world. It is a fairly powerful military machine. Air Force. Is it the most technologically advanced? No, I would say definitely not. But I will say this, especially in the last 90 or so days, we have seen the Russian Air Force in the doctrine, especially the ground attack capabilities of the Russian Air Force. We have seen the Russian Air Force continuing to adapt and change to modern conditions. Especially in the use of drones. The Russian capability, in terms of drone capability, was almost near non-existent with the exception of sensing drones, reconnaissance type drones. The actual strike drones, the ability of the Russian Air Force to reach out and hit targets with these kamikaze drones, is a new element or a newer element to the Russian force construct. And I can tell you from the start of the conflict to where we're at right now, the Russians have made massive, I mean massive amounts of improvements in its ability to sense and then rapidly strike Ukrainian targets. As we continue to receive video evidence of the ongoing conflict, we are seeing more and more Russian capabilities. And not just drone use. Attack helicopters and fast-moving strike aircraft, delivering large amounts of ordnance on Ukrainian targets. We're seeing that improve. Very difficult if you are a Ukrainian military that is fighting what is essentially a static war of attrition via ground forces while you have the third largest air force on the planet, that's a fact, destroying your military, destroying your ground forces from the sky. And that's what we're seeing happening right now. A quick overview of the Russian Air Force, and I think this is important to talk about. So, MiG-31s. Now, the Russians use these for the most part as air supremacy weapon systems. They fire extremely long-range air-to-air missiles designed to hit other aerial targets at great distance. They have become a thorn in the side of the Ukrainian Air Force. The Russians have 129, 130 of those systems. Some of those systems have been converted, obviously, to launch the Killjoy air-to-ground weapon system. This hypersonic or just sub-hypersonic air-to-ground semi-ballistic missile system. Very effective weapon system. Next, the Su-27s. Russians probably have anywhere from 100, 150 to 200 of those active. Su-30s. The Russians have essentially 110. And at least as of December, it looks like 11 of those Su-30s have been destroyed. So 11 out of 110. The Su-34. This is the workhorse of Russian attack aviation. Russians have essentially 150 of these systems. It is reported that 21 Su-34s have been shot down, with one Su-34M also being shot down. And the Russians are continuing to manufacture and produce those systems as we speak. Su-35s. Russians have 118 plus of those systems, more being manufactured. As of December, five Su-35s have been shot down by Ukrainian forces. Su-57s. There are approximately 20 of those. There are approximately 10 prototypes and approximately 10 production models of the Su-57 that are active in the Russian military. Then we have the older aircraft that in some cases have been upgraded to fairly modern weapon systems. So the Su-24s, the Russians have over 200, 250 of those systems, with 11 have been reportedly been shot down. Su-25s, ground attack aircraft. Now, I will say it's kind of disturbing how those systems are being utilized by the Russians. For the most part, when I see a Su-25 attacking targets, at least on video footage provided by, say, the Russian Air Force, those aircraft are not directly attacking Ukrainian targets. You see them flying, you see them nose up and then fire 57mm rockets or larger rockets in the general vicinity of Ukrainian forces. It does not appear to be a very effective ground attack system as it's being used, unless it's being used in a manner that we're simply not able to see currently. I would say, by and large, the Su-34s, the Su-34 fullbacks are, without a doubt, again, that precision strike capability, that workhorse of Russian aviation. So that's kind of where the Russian Air Force sits at the current moment. I'm not even getting into naval aviation or the attack helicopter capability, which is omnipresent and continuing to be very effective. We don't have exact numbers on those force deployments. Obviously, the Russia has suffered many shoot downs of the Ka-52s. Now, not so many of the Mi-28s and lesser of the Mi-24s, which probably aren't being used like the Ka-52s are being used. But again, it just in terms of air power, with essentially the Ukrainians having very little and the Russians having the third largest air force on the planet, very difficult situation if you're the Ukrainians. And again, it's just something that's not often talked about, but when you do see ground combat footage, the first thing that gets the Ukrainian forces moving, seeking cover, is Russian aviation. And you see it time and time again. If you watched the documentary 20 Days in Mariupol, time and time again you see Ukrainian infantry, Ukrainian forces, as soon as they hear Russian aviation, they seek cover. And the reason they're seeking cover is because they're worried about getting hit by those aircraft. It's having an impact. Now, is it being discussed much? No, it's not. I believe that the effectiveness of the Russian Air Force is having more of an effect on the war than what is actually being reported. As we know, the Ukrainians simply do not report casualties, especially rear area casualties. And we know the Russians are continuing to use these long-range glide bombs. And we believe at this point those systems are having an effect on Ukrainian forces. It is decreasing morale, it's causing casualties, it's disrupting supplies. It is doing what the Russian aviation is designed to do. Fix targets, fix command and control targets. So we wanted to talk about that. We wanted to have that conversation using a little bit different map today. Thought I'd change things up a little bit. But we will continue, obviously, to cover what is happening on the ground. We're watching the situation in Avdiivka very closely. We're continuing to watch the situation on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, Krenki, other areas as well. And we'll continue to cover. And as always, thanks for joining us. Have a good day.